Cast iron plants. These are my favorite plants right now. I love these plants. They are just as low maintenance and durable as snake plants and ZZ plants. If you're new to plant parenthood, you're a little unconfident, you're gifting this to somebody and you're not sure about their skills, this is a perfect place to start. The advantage that this plant has over a snake plant or a ZZ plant is that unlike those plants, this plant is entirely non-toxic and pet/baby safe. So if you have one of those lying around the house, definitely a good place to start. They don't really require much care, but by the end of this video, you will be an expert. You will know exactly what to look out for when you buy this plant to make sure you have a healthy one. You will know where to place it when you take it home so that it's set up for success, and you will know how to care for this plant correctly so that it is living a long and healthy life with you. And on that note, let's start. You get your cast iron, you're holding it for the first time. Where should your eyes go to evaluate how healthy this plant is? What you want to do is look at these large green leaves, and you want to look out for any brown or black spots, or even yellowing. You want to look out for any brown, yellowing, or black spots. If you see any of that across your leaf, especially if they're big, that means that there's an issue with this plant. It's a little bit unhealthy. But if your plants look like these plants, where they're big and green and wonderful, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with this plant. One thing to note is this plant can have little small marks in the leaves. So if you zoom in a little bit closely, you can see this plant, for example, has a mark down the stem here. It has a tiny hole here. That is quite a common trait of these plants. It means that it may have suffered some sort of physical damage as it was growing, but as long as it looks small like this, doesn't have any browning or yellowing spots coming out of it, it means it's perfectly healed. It's kind of like a human being that's kind of cut himself, him or herself, has a scab, and that scab has formed. It is part of the plant's character. Frankly, with a plant like this, if it doesn't have any of these, it's probably a fake plant. So, like snake plants and ZZ plants, this plant can tolerate low levels of darkness. However, also like those plants, what you don't want to do is take them home and put them in dark areas straight away. Although you can acclimate it to that area, you would have a much higher chance of success if you take this plant and put it closer to a window. So if this was a window, what you want to do is you want to bring it close to that window so you can give the plant the largest view of the sky as you possibly can. Once you do that, over time, your plant will acclimate to the light levels in your house, which is going to be lower than the nursery it grew up in. Once it's acclimated, which should take about a month or so, wait a month, you can then move it into that dark spot you wanted. However, it still needs to have some direct view of the window and the sky. If it's in total darkness, it will die. It will die slowly, but it will die. Now, what you can do with this plant is give it too much sunlight. So when you're putting it by the window, again, you want to make sure it has the largest view of the sky, but you don't want there to be too much direct sunlight. This is quite a slow plant, and by slow, what I mean is it grows very slowly. It transfers water from the soil up to its leaves very slowly. And so as a result, if it's getting a lot of light from the sun, direct sunlight, it's going to sweat really slowly. You see, plants like humans sweat to stay cool. When a plant gets hot, most of the water that's actually being pulled from the roots up to the tips of the soil and evaporating out, most of that water, about 80% of that water flow, is doing what we humans do to sweat. It's to cool the plant down. This plant doesn't do that very quickly. There's a ceiling for how quickly it can do that. So when it's getting too much direct sunlight, it'll start to burn, and that burn will start from the tips of the leaves. It'll go light brown, it'll go all the way towards the bottom, and yeah, eventually you'll start seeing the plant dying. Obviously, if it starts to move, as long as you start seeing it on the tip, don't wait for the whole thing to burn out, just move it a little bit further away from the window. The point I'm trying to make is you should start by placing it close to the window, monitoring it for a few days, and then if you're noticing anything wrong on the tips, then you can move it away. Don't do the reverse where you're putting it somewhere dark. If you do that, it'll be totally happy and you'll find that perfect sweet spot for this particular plant. But stay vigilant. Once you have the plant, however, and it's in that perfect spot, there's actually not much you need to do to make sure it's happy. You just need to water it. We have a whole video where we talk about how to water your plants correctly. All you need to know is that this plant falls into the category of plants that like the soil to dry out entirely. It wants its soil to go completely bone dry, which means from the very top of the surface to the base of the soil pot, there should be no water left in there before you water it again. Water it correctly according to the instructions we show you in that video, and you will have success with this plant. That is basically all you can do. Now, the other thing you need to do when you take care of this plant is once a month, you take a damp cloth and just wipe down the leaves. Because this plant has really big leaves, similar to that of a bird of paradise, over time dust will collect on those leaves. That dust is going to prevent light from penetrating the leaf and therefore photosynthesizing effectively. All you need to do is once a month, wipe down that plant and it will stay happy and thriving and even look very good. And that's basically all you need to do. What are some common things you need to look out for there for when you have this plant? Well, really, it sounds kind of obvious, but you can either overwater or underwater this plant. If you overwater your plants, which means there's too much water in the soil, your plant stems and leaves will start going yellow. And I have an example of that to show you here. Got an example here. Now, if you look closely, you will notice that these two leaves on this cast iron have gone light and greenish/yellowy. What this is telling me is that this plant has been overwatered, and that's basically what it looks like. So what happens when we overwater a plant like this? To get the answer, we first need to understand what it looks like in the soil. Now, this stem goes all the way into the soil, and from the base of that stem, roots are forming. Those roots are providing anchor, which is holding the stem into place. When we overwater the plant, that water is basically rotting away those roots and those roots vanish, which basically means that this stem no longer has any roots down there, which is holding it into place, which means if I see a plant that looks like this, that has yellowy/greeny parts, and I pull it, it should very easily come out with very little effort. As you can see, there's basically no roots left at the end of the stem, which tells me that this has been overwatered for a very long time. So you might ask me, Sharif, that's interesting, but why are the rest of the stems green? Surely if we've overwatered it, all of the plants should be showing symptoms of overwatering. So first of all, I'd say yes, that is a very astute observation, though a cynical one. The reason for that, I would probably say, is when this plant was being watered, the person watering it, probably me if I'm being honest, was continuously watering it in one particular spot. So if you have your watering can and you're just going there every single week, water is getting to the rest of the soil slowly, but there is a large concentration of water in this area where those two stems were. That is where therefore overwatering site happened and therefore the stems died. The larger your plant pot, the more likely you are to have pockets of wetness somewhere else, which is why it's very important when you're watering your plant to make sure you are watering the entire plant correctly and equally, and when you're checking your plant, making sure you are checking the entire soil body and not just one particular spot. That is what overwatering looks like. Now, what does underwatering looks like? Because underwatering, as I said earlier, will also make a leaf go brown/yellowy, but it looks a little bit different. And I have an example right here. Now this is a very underwatered stem, and as you can see, it's totally different. It literally feels like paper. This is a dead leaf, like nothing's happening here. Now here's a question. If I pull this out, will it come out as easily as the previous one? What do you think? Nope, it's not coming out as easily. Why? Because that one was coming out as easily because remember, the roots were overwatered, the overwatered roots therefore died, and that's what allowed me to pull it out. This has been underwatered, right? So no water and nutrients have gone up to this leaf, which is why it's dehydrated over time, but the roots are still intact, which means it's not gonna let me pull it out. And so to take care of a plant like this, I need a pair of scissors. And all I need to do is go in, make sure they're clean so that you're not transferring anything onto the plant, cut it out, whatever you wanna do with this, do it, but probably wanna get rid of it. And you have a nice looking cast iron plant again. So now you might ask me the same kind of question, but Sharif, how come one part of the plant was underwatered, but the rest of the plant looks totally fine? And I would say it's probably the same thing, but the reverse. What probably happened was that plant was sitting under a ball of soil that got very condensed, and because it got very condensed, it wasn't allowing any water to enter into it. And as a result, those roots never got moisture, they eventually dried out, or never got moisture, and therefore the whole stem which was attached to that root ball effectively dried out. So what you want to do if you ever notice a plant like this, and general good plant practice anyway, is once in a while, about once a month, take a piece of stick or a chopstick, something that's very blunt, not too sharp, and so therefore could accidentally damage your plants, and just go in and start poking in. Effectively, what you're doing there is you are creating pockets of air into your soil where water can enter through and therefore moisten your soil equally. So do that about once a month, particularly if you notice something like this, and over time, your cast iron will be happy. It's good practice. I like to do it, to have one of these guys. Just leave it in your pot and it can be there whenever you need it handy. And that's that. That is basically all you need to know about cast irons. As long as you place it in the right place, you give it the right care, i.e. giving it enough sunlight and just waiting for it to be bone dry before you water it, there's very little you can go wrong. There's very little you can do that'll make you go wrong with this plant. Again, it is pet friendly. It's my favorite plant right now. I hope you love it as well. If you have any questions, let us know. We'd do our best to make sure you're happy plant cast iron parents for the rest of your life and the rest of your plants' lives too. Thank you.